If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to the channel. And if you're enjoying these stories, there's a link below to buy me a cup of coffee. This is the Hasidic Story Project with Barak Holman, podcasting from Jerusalem, Israel. This podcast is sponsored by listeners just like you. To become a supporter of this podcast, please go to HasidicStory.com. HASIDIC story.com. You'll never know. You'll never know. You'll never know. You'll never know. Shalom Aleichem, my sweetest friends. It's another week, and I have some more Hasidic stories for you. But of course, as I mentioned last week, this isn't just a regular week. We're still not getting a lot of sleep over here in Israel. And this morning, I'll just share with you a little kind of personal journal of my experience with my children. So we have married children, Baruch Hashem, and we still have teenagers living at home. And this morning, around 7:15, there was a warning. We live next to a bomb shelter, so even though we have a shelter in our house, after seeing the damage of these missiles, as a family, we decided that we would go to the public bomb shelter since it's about 20 feet underground and it seems a lot safer, which means that every time we're leaving our house, and the kids are a little annoyed, everybody's pretty much annoyed, but at least we have a place to go. And as we're sitting there this morning, my 14-year-old daughter and my 13-year-old son, they wanted to understand what was going on. What is this whole war about? So I explained to them that Iran wants to destroy the state of Israel with nuclear weapons, and that a nuclear weapon, when it explodes, would kill instantly hundreds of thousands of people, would destroy all of the buildings for several kilometers. There would be radiation, people would die of radiation sickness. You wouldn't be able to go back to that part of the land of Israel for decades, maybe longer. The soil might not be able to grow vegetables that are healthy, and if there were multiple bombs, it would pretty much be the end of living in the land of Israel for the foreseeable future. So after I explained that to her, she said to me, and if the Iranians had a missile like that, do you think they'd actually use it? And my answer to her was, are we sitting in a bomb shelter at 7 o'clock in the morning? And at 1:30 at night? And at 3 o'clock in the morning? And at 4:30 in the morning? And she got the message. So, Bezat Hashem, we should hear good news. I dedicate this podcast episode every week, and I'm going to do it again. Bezat Hashem, to the continued success of our soldiers in battle wherever they are, whether in Gaza, whether in Iran, and of course in Yehuda and Shomron, or places we don't know. The returning of all the hostages, healthy and alive, Bezat Hashem, and those that are unfortunately no longer alive, may they be returned for Kever Yisrael, kosher burial. And we do see success, by the way. Whatever the army is doing in Gaza, they're figuring some things out. Should continue, Bezat Hashem. The full recovery of everybody who's been injured or who is ill. The comforting of those that lost loved ones. And I have to say, something around 900 soldiers have died since October 7th. And it is a tragedy. Every person is an entire world. But the one small comfort is to know that those deaths were not in vain. So may Hashem comfort those families that lost loved ones. And to the continued unity of the Jewish people here in the land of Israel and all around the world. This week I have two stories for you. They both happen to be Chabad stories. The first one takes place with the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, who lived from 1880 to 1950, and who led the Chabad Lubavitch movement through some of its most difficult times. First in communist Russia, where the Rebbe defied Stalin himself to keep Judaism alive. And then 10 years in Poland, until the Nazis forced him to flee. And finally, the last 10 years in America, where he devoted every breath he had to saving world Judaism. This story took place in 1924, and back then, the communists had declared war on all religion, but especially the Jewish religion. The previous Rebbe had established his headquarters in the city of Rostov, which was far from the eyes of the government in Moscow. And from there, he had hundreds of secret Torah schools, hidden mikvahs, and also secret rabbis. You know, there's stories of these mikvahs that they were hidden in people's apartments, in a closet, or in a backyard, in a shed. And I've told stories about mohels, people who perform circumcisions, that would be invited to go into people's homes when they weren't there and circumcise a child. But all of these people, teachers, rabbis, workers, they all had to be paid. And the students in whatever schools and yeshivas there were also needed to be fed. And of course, giving money to Jewish causes was counter-revolutionary and could put a person in prison. There was one chassid whose name wasn't mentioned in the story who ran one of these underground yeshivas and had the same problem. The staff had to be paid, the students needed to eat, and there was no money. So this chassid, he didn't know what to do, and he kept davening every day. And one day, he happens to meet a wealthy Jew in Rostov. And he mentioned to him that he's heading this yeshiva and that they need a donation, and would he be willing to help? But the wealthy Jew wasn't interested in giving any money to the yeshiva. And day after day, this chassid would nag the wealthy Jew and tell him, listen, we need food. The staff hasn't been paid in months. Please, you have to help me keep the yeshiva going. You have plenty of money, Baruch Hashem, and Hashem gave you the money for a good reason, so give some to us. But no matter what he said, this wealthy Jew was not interested in giving over any of his money. Apparently, he was a true miser and loved his money more than his fellow Jews. But this Rosh Hashiva didn't give up. Every day he'd come back and he'd say, maybe today, maybe today. And one day, the wealthy Jew says to this Rosh Hashiva, listen, I have no children. My wife and I have been married for many years, and a home without children is an empty home. It's a broken home. I'll have nobody to leave my money to, no one to carry on my name, no legacy in this world, no one to even say Kaddish for me. And then the wealthy Jew looked this chassid straight in the eyes and he said, if you, being a chassid of the Rebbe, and a man that believes in God, would give me a bracha, give me a blessing, that my wife and I would have a child, I'll give you all the money you need. Everything. Now the chassid knew better than to give brachas for things that he wasn't able to bless for. But he was so desperate, he couldn't even believe the words coming out of his mouth. He said, okay, if you give us the money, I'll bless you to have a child. And the wealthy Jew laughed and he said, obviously you're not a businessman. You don't know how business propositions work. I'm not giving you my money before I get my goods. Give me the blessing. If your blessing comes true and my wife gives birth to a child, then I'll give you the money. But the chassid didn't have 9 months to wait. And so he said to the wealthy Jew, if you give me the money that I need now, I promise you, Be'ezrat Hashem, a year from now, you will be hugging your newborn son. And the sum that this Rosh Hashiva needed was very, very big. The wealthy Jew burst into tears. He was so grateful to have this blessing. He walked with the chassid to his safe, counted out bill by bill all of the money that the chassid needed, and put it into his hand. Now the chassid felt a little guilty about what he just did. On the one hand, he helped this wealthy Jew do an incredible mitzvah. And look at the hundreds of Jewish souls that would be saved, learning in yeshiva and having food and being able to pay the staff. Think of all the Torah that would be learned in the merit of this wealthy Jew, all the mitzvot that were going to be done. He hoped that in the merit of all of the davening and all of the holy work that people were doing in yeshiva, that his blessing would come true. But after a full year, there was no child. And the wealthy Jew comes storming into the chassid's house, and he said, you remember your promise to me? Your so-called bracha? I want my money back. My wife still hasn't given birth. She's not even pregnant. You promised me that within a year she would give birth. It's been a year, and you're a fake and a liar. Give me my money back. And the chassid said, listen, usually my blessings work. Let's give it a few more weeks, and maybe something will happen. So the rich man left and he said, you get one more chance. If not, I will tell the authorities exactly what you're doing. I'll have you and everyone arrested, and I'll tell them that you stole my money. So right away, the chassid tried to arrange a private meeting with the Rebbe. It took a week, and he was standing in front of the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, who told you that you could promise children to someone else? Maybe this man and his wife are not deserving of children? How can you do such a thing? I can't help. What you did was totally wrong. And the chassid said, but Rebbe, I didn't do it for myself. I did it for the Talmidim, for the students. Without this money, the yeshiva would have closed down. The Rebbe said, it wasn't your place to do something that isn't within your power. You could have kept davening and waiting for Hashem to help you. But what you did was totally wrong, and I can't help you. Day after day, the wealthy Jew would see the Rosh Hashiva, and the Rosh Hashiva would try to fake a smile, like everything is going to be fine, but it wasn't going to be fine, and it wasn't fine. 2 weeks had passed, and the chassid had no other choice but to go back to the Rebbe, or simply run away. And he managed to get another private audience with the Rebbe, and he said, please, Rebbe, save me. You have to help me. This wealthy Jew is going to turn us all in. He's going to tell the authorities that we stole his money, and tell them everything that we do. So the Rebbe thought for a second, and he said, I'm telling you now, this is the only time Go back and tell the wealthy Jew in my name that this year, Be'ezrat Hashem, he will have a son. Of course, the Chassid was beaming. He was so relieved. The Rebbe said to him, but never, ever make promises like that again. And the Chassid went back to the wealthy Jew, and he said, I want to apologize for thinking that my blessings were capable of changing a decree from heaven. Apparently they're not. And so I went to my Rebbe, and the Rebbe blessed you with a child. And he said, by the end of this year, you will have a child. And now I can guarantee you that my blessings might not be worth much. But if the Rebbe blessed you, you will have a child. And sure enough, by the end of that year, they had a baby boy. And from that point on, the wealthy Jew supported all of the Rebbe's projects with an open heart and an open hand. Now this might seem like a strange story, but there's really something deeper here, my friends. It was most likely that this man and his wife, the wealthy Jew, did not merit to have children. But when he gave that large sum of money, he created a conduit, a spiritual channel to receive the blessing from the Rebbe. It's true that the Chassid wasn't a worthy vessel for giving that blessing, but in the merit of supporting Torah study, it allowed the Rebbe to bless him. May we all be blessed, Be'ezrat Hashem, to give a lot of tzedakah, to have healthy children, and know that when we save Jewish souls, we create the very channels through which our own salvation can flow. I have another story for you. This happened during the time of the Tzemach Tzedek, who was the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who lived from 1789 to 1866. And this was the time when the Hasidim faced tremendous challenges. It's funny to say that. We're also facing tremendous challenges, different challenges. But isn't it amazing that all through Jewish history, Jews have faced these tremendous challenges? If it wasn't the Tsar, it was someone else. If it wasn't Islam, it was Christianity. If it wasn't capitalism, it was communism. It's quite amazing to me. Anyhow, this was the period under the harsh rule of Tsar Nicholas I, and there was a devastating fire that had burned down the house of the Tzemach Tzedek and his family. And in those days everything was made out of wood, so when there was a fire, it would quickly go from house to house. And this was the day that the cornerstone was being laid for a new home for the Rebbe and his family. And a large number of Hasidim came to the ceremony. A table and chair was set up for the Rebbe at the construction site. And he sat there with the Hasidim and he said, which would you truly prefer me to say? A Hasidic discourse or a Hasidic story? And the Hasidim were surprised by the question, but they chose the story. They told the Rebbe that they heard many Hasidic lessons from him, but very rarely would the Rebbe tell them a story. And so the Tzemach Tzedek said, okay, I'll tell you a story. There was a man called Yaakov Ish Tam. Yaakov, the innocent. Tam also means pure and complete. And Rabbi Yaakov Ish Tam made his living by leasing the rights to all of the businesses and agricultural properties belonging to a poritz, a nobleman who owned all the land. And then Rabbi Yaakov would sublet all of the property to different people and collect all the money and give it to the landowner, to the poritz. There was an inn with a tavern that was rented by a Jew, and at the end of the year, he couldn't come up with the rent money. So Yaakov Ish Tam sent him a notice and said he had to pay the money by a certain time or he was going to be evicted. But it happened to be that both Yaakov Ish Tam and the innkeeper were Hasidim of the same holy Rebbe, the great Rebbe, Rabbi Yisrael of Rizhin, the Rizhiner Rebbe, who lived from 1796 to 1850. And I've told many stories of the Rizhiner Rebbe. He was a direct descendant of the Maggid Mezrich, and he was known as the Heiliger Rizhiner Rebbe. And one of the big things about the Rizhiner was his court, his Hasidic court, was very regal and full of gold and diamonds. And I've told the story before many times, so I won't repeat it again. He was such a great Rebbe that his influence extended throughout the whole Russian Empire and beyond. So the innkeeper, who was desperate at that point, he couldn't afford to be kicked out of his inn, goes to his Rebbe and he says, Rebbe, can you help me out? You know, Yaakov Ishtam was one of your Hasidim. Maybe you have some connections. Maybe you can talk with him. And so the Rebbe called for Yaakov Ishtam, and Rebbe Yaakov showed up, and the Rebbe said to him, Yaakov, I know the innkeeper can't afford the rent, but give him another year, and Bezat Hashem, he'll be blessed with Mea Sharim 100 times over, and he'll be able to pay you back. And so Rebbe Yaakov, who was quite wealthy from his business of subleasing all the land of the Poritz, he said, okay, I'm going to pay the rent for this year. Now he owes me the rent personally, and I'm expecting the Rebbe to make sure that he pays me the rent. It wasn't that he expected the Rebbe to pay the rent, but that he was saying, you know, Rebbe, you make sure that whatever davening you can do, you make it happen so you can pay me the rent. And so Yaakov Ishtam paid the rent out of his own money. However, at the end of the second year, the innkeeper situation had not improved at all, and he was not able to pay the rent. And so Yaakov told him, go find another place, because I paid the rent myself. I'm not going to pay it again. Now you already owe me for 2 years. So what did the innkeeper do? He went back to the original Rebbe. He said, Rebbe, you have to help me. I don't know what to do. It's another year and I can't pay. So once again, the Rebbe called in Yaakov Ishtam, and he said, let the innkeeper have another year. 1 more year. So Yaakov again paid the rent out of his own money, and now he was feeling a little bit of pressure, because it was a lot of money for him. But when the 3rd year was up, there was still no money from the innkeeper. And this time, the Rishner was not able to convince Yaakov Ishtam to wait for a 4th year. Yaakov insisted he couldn't afford to pay the rent again, and unfortunately, he was going to have to evict the chassid from the inn. So here was a chassid of the Rishner Rebbe, Yaakov Ishtam, that for 3 years went without the rent money that was rightfully his, and the financial strain was too much, and he obeyed the Rebbe 2 times, but the 3rd time it was just too much for him, and he evicted the innkeeper. But not long after that, Yaakov Ishtam returned his soul to his maker, and he's standing before the heavenly court. They went over his life of Torah and mitzvot, and they said he is deserving of the name Yaakov Ishtam. He had a life full of Torah and mitzvot, of tzedakah, and doing everything right. But there was one serious charge against him. He had failed to heed a direct request of his Rebbe, the Tzaddik of Rishon. And so the heavenly court decided that he would have to go to Gehenom, a place of temporary suffering, to atone for what he had not completed in this world. But then suddenly a man appeared and challenged the court's ruling. He said that the members of the court were all souls that had been away from this physical world for so many years, that they had forgotten or never even knew how difficult dealing with money and business in this world really is. And he said Yaakov Ishtam obeyed the Rishner Rebbe twice and paid the rent from his own money for 2 years. Not getting paid for the 3rd year and then asking for a 4th year? That was too much. No one should expect a person to be able to handle that. And at that point, the Tzemach Tzedek looks at the Hasidim that were gathered around him at the construction site. These were people that understood what it was to make a living, the pressure to support a family, to pay their bills, and the challenge of balancing their spiritual obligations with the harsh realities of living under the Tsar's rule. And then the Tzemach Tzedek says, in my opinion, Yaakov Ishtam is innocent. What do you all think? And now the Hasidim understood why the Rebbe was happy to tell a story instead of giving over a Hasidic discourse. The heavenly court had agreed to use a judge and jury in this world to decide where the soul of Yaakov Ishtam should go. And when the Hasidim understood that the Rebbe was the judge and they were the jury, they shouted, "Innocent! He's innocent!" And so he was judged in heaven. And now the Hasidim understood the deepest meaning. Just as Yaakov Ishtam had been flexible, bending 3 times for his Rebbe despite his own needs, so the heavenly court showed flexibility, asking the Rebbe and the Hasidim to judge him. And just as their houses had burned down and needed being rebuilding, sometimes the judgments in heaven need rebuilding as well. The Tzemach Tzedek knew that a story, not a discourse, was needed, because stories can reach places that discourses can't. Stories are so powerful that they can even free an innocent soul from the suffering of Gehenom. May we all merit to reach that level, both in giving over the stories and receiving back from them. Thank you so much for listening, my sweetest friends. Thank you to all the supporters of the podcast and all the listeners. Thank you for sharing and listening. And Bezat Hashem, we should hear good news. So I hope you have a beautiful Shabbos and a beautiful week. And until next week, my sweetest friends, take care of yourselves and sei gesund.